May 1945. The war in Europe is over. The most fearsome armored force the world had ever seen, Germany's Panzer divisions, falls silent. Hundreds of thousands of men, millions of tons of steel, stop dead in their tracks. It's easy to think they were all just blown up or pushed into a ditch, but the real story is far more complex, and in some cases, truly bizarre. What actually happens when the most feared war machine on Earth simply gives up?
The end wasn't a single event. It was chaos all across Europe, from the fields of France to the forests of Czechoslovakia. Entire Panzer divisions were surrendering en masse. They weren't just surrendering to the Americans or the British. They were surrendering to the French, the Canadians, and most terrifyingly for them, the Soviets. The Allies were suddenly responsible for managing an empire of steel. They had to disarm the crews, secure the vehicles, and figure out what to do with thousands upon thousands of tanks, assault guns, and half-tracks. And if you think this story ends with a quick trick to the scrapyard, you should probably subscribe, because the reality was far stranger. For the vast majority of Panzers, the end was fire and disassembly. Europe was a continent in ruins, starved for raw materials. Steel was more valuable than gold for rebuilding cities, bridges, and factories. These captured tanks represented one of the largest and most accessible sources of high-quality steel on the continent. So the great scrapping began. In massive collection points, which looked like something from a post-apocalyptic film, workers with cutting torches dismantled the legends. King Tigers, whose armor had shrugged off countless Allied shells, were methodically sliced into manageable pieces. It was a brutal, unceremonious end for machines that had once dominated the battlefield. But the Allies didn't scrap everything. They were acutely aware that German tank technology was in many ways years ahead of their own. Specialist teams from Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union scoured the battlefields and collection points for the most advanced and interesting examples. They weren't looking for trophies to put on a pedestal. They were looking for secrets. How did the Panther's sloped armor work so well? What made the Tiger's 88mm guns so accurate? How was the complex suspension of the King Tiger engineered? These trophy tanks were shipped back home to places like the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland and Bovington in the UK, where they were taken apart, tested to destruction, and studied relentlessly. While the Western Allies were focused on evaluating individual vehicles, the Soviet Union had a different strategy. They took everything. Special Red Army units, known as trophy brigades, followed the frontline troops with a single purpose: to seize German technology. They didn't just take the best tanks, they took the factories that built them. They took the machine tools, the blueprints, the spare parts, and most importantly, the engineers and scientists. This systematic industrial looting gave the Soviet tank industry a massive injection of advanced German know-how, which directly influenced the next generation of Soviet tanks that would later face off against NATO in the Cold War. Here's where the story gets really interesting. Some Panzer divisions didn't go to the scrapyard or the laboratory. They went back to war, just under a new flag. The newly liberated French army was in desperate need of modern equipment. And what was readily available? hundreds of abandoned German tanks, especially the formidable Panther. For a short period after the war, France's elite 503rd Tank Regiment was equipped almost entirely with captured German Panthers. Imagine being a French citizen in 1946, seeing the very same tanks that occupied your country now rolling down the street bearing the French tricolor. It was a pragmatic, if slightly surreal, solution to a post-war problem.
France wasn't alone. Czechoslovakia had been a critical part of Germany's war machine, with factories like Skoda and CKD producing thousands of armored vehicles. When the war ended, the production lines for vehicles like the highly effective Jagdpanzer 38, better known as the Hetzer, were still intact. The newly reformed Czechoslovakian army simply restarted production. They built over 150 new Hetzers for their own use and even exported some. For years after the war, a tank designed for the Wehrmacht served as a frontline vehicle for a nation it had once occupied.
Perhaps the most unbelievable chapter in the post-war life of the Panzers took place in the Middle East. In the 1950s, a fledgling Syrian army was looking to build its armored forces on a budget. They went shopping, buying up surplus World War II German armor from countries like France, Spain, and Czechoslovakia. For years, Panzer IVs, Stug 3s, and even a few Hummel self-propelled guns formed the backbone of Syria's armored corps. It led to one of history's strangest military encounters. In the 1960s, Israeli Super Shermans, themselves heavily upgraded versions of an American World War II tank, fought against German Panzer IVs crewed by Syrians on the Golan Heights. 20 years after the fall of Berlin, the Panzers were fighting their final battles.
And what about the men? The war was over, but for many, the job wasn't. The Western Allies faced a monumental logistical task in occupied Germany and needed manpower. Their solution was to form German service units made up of disarmed Wehrmacht personnel. These men, still organized in military-style formations, performed crucial tasks like transport, mining clearing, and construction. For a time, it was a common sight to see former Panzer crewmen driving their trucks and half-tracks, now serving the British or American occupation forces. They were in a strange limbo, no longer soldiers, not yet civilians, ghosts in their own homeland.
We can't forget that Panzer divisions were made of people. For the hundreds of thousands of crewmen, the end of the war meant becoming a prisoner. They were held in vast POW camps, some for months, others for years, especially those captured by the Soviets. The journey home was long and arduous, often to cities and families that no longer existed. They had to reintegrate into a society that was grappling with the guilt and devastation of the war they had fought. Some would later join the new armies of West and East Germany, bringing their experience to the Cold War front lines. Others, like the famous tank ace Otto Karius, simply tried to build a normal life, opening a pharmacy he aptly named the Tiger Pharmacy. So where are the Panzers today? The survivors are incredibly rare. Most are the trophy tanks that were saved for technical evaluation and eventually found their way into museums. These are the pristine examples you see at Bovington or the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection. Others are battlefield wrecks pulled from rivers or swamps in Eastern Europe decades later. Ghosts of the war dragged back into the light. Each one that survives is a priceless historical artifact, a direct physical link to the most destructive conflict in human history. They are a testament to both incredible engineering and immense tragedy.